30 years ago, our parish was born. 1987. There were 400 families in the original parish. We were not among them. They met in the Jupiter High School cafeteria, the old Jupiter High School cafeteria, a humble beginning. The hall next door wasn't there. It was built in 1991. The church here was built in 2002, and the school was built next door 2003. Indian Creek Parkway was a 2-lane road with no lights, no neighborhoods. The number of people in the parish has grown by a multiple of at least 7. The families that started the parish have grown. Jupiter has grown, and we hope that you have grown spiritually along the way. All good stuff. When we look at what we have accomplished for the greater glory of God, we could all sit back and say, "Well done, my good and faithful servants." We could say that to each other and be content. But that, my friends, is something better said to a person who is dying, and we are only 30. The second reading is so powerful. Take it personally when you hear it. It's a perfect reading to announce this upcoming celebration of our 30th anniversary. We give thanks to God always for all of you, remembering you in our prayers, unceasingly calling to mind your work of faith and labor of love and endurance in hope. We've accomplished great things through your prayers, your works of faith, your ongoing labor of love, and your hope that got us through the rough spots in our parish. Yet we have so much more to do, and we want each member of the parish to have an opportunity to participate in our future, just like those who have contributed so much to get us here to our 30th anniversary. We are all in this together. We all celebrate success, our success, and failure, our failure. And there has been plenty of both. Funny for me, 30 years ago, I was turning 30, and for the math impaired, that makes me almost 60 now. Looking back, I distinctly remember my 30th birthday party. All my friends were there. It was so much fun. It was fun until my mom and dad came up and said to me, "Stephen, would you come back into our room and speak to us for a moment?" It was their house that I lived in. I just figured the stereo was too loud again, so I went back to their part of the house and they handed me an envelope. I'm like, is it cash? Is it a check? No. Inside was a note with 3 lines. The note said, "You're 30 now, son. It's time for you to grow up, get a job, and get a life. Love, Mom and Dad." Just kidding. Truth be told, I had already served 7 years in the military, left the Air Force as a captain by then. I was married with 1 child, working here in Palm Beach County in my chosen profession by that time, and by the time I turned 30. But it's not very funny or interesting as a story. This little made-up story is a much better way to introduce what we want to talk about. And that is that this is the first week in a 4-week series we're calling Turning 30. Because as a parish, we're 30. It's time for us to grow up, get a job, and get a life. And I'll walk you through what each one of those exclamations means. But first off, let's clear up a common misconception. Many times people will say that at age 30, it's time to make sure that we have identified our priorities in life. The parish needs to do this, and that's why we're experiencing changes lately. But just like you, we're going to make some mistakes along the way, and we learn from those mistakes, and then we all grow and move forward together. In the first reading, it says, "I have called you by your name." We have a unique call to serve God in a way that no one else can, corporately, as the body of the parish, okay? Corporately as a church and individually as members of this flock. We are all part of his creation, and each of us has specific gifts to contribute. We each have unique skills that no one else has. Before we can exercise those skills, though, we must realize that God is God and we are not. I am the Lord, there is no other. Then we have to figure out why we were created. And that's the point of this series, to help each one of us recognize his or her value to this parish, to the community here in Jupiter, and to God. You know how we always say, I need to get my priorities straight. You only have so much time in each day, and you say, I need to prioritize my list of things to do. What are the most important things for me to be doing right now? When I was in the military, they taught us our priorities were God, family, country, in that order. Then I went to the seminary. They taught us our priorities were family, job, diaconate, in that order. I think God is presumed at the seminary. I know they meant well, but I've learned they're all wrong. And this is interesting. The word priority came into the English language in the 1400s. It was singular. It meant the very first thing. And it stayed singular for the next 500 years. There was no word priorities. It was priority, one true thing. Only in the 1900s did we make it plural and started talking about priorities. Of course, with the onset of the digital age, we somehow reasoned that by changing the word to plural, we could bend reality and multitask. Somehow, we would now be able to have many first things. This gives us a life where there are many things being the priority. That's our life here. But this logic actually creates a life where nothing is truly first. Is that you? Strung out from one priority to the next, never getting any one thing done. Then, when someone at church says you should be adding one more thing to your already overwhelming life, you feel like it's too much, right? When Father Don said in the first series that we need to be choosing a step, for many of us, that was one step too far. He stepped over the line with that one. I couldn't help myself. I know he stepped on some toes there. But we need to step up if we're going to take our parish to the next level. Dare I say it? The top step. How can we as parishioners talk about a God when we as individuals maybe don't feel like we carry God inside of us every day? How can we invite our neighbor in here if we only manage to stumble in here ourselves every week unassisted? Shouldn't that be reserved for the holy people? But our obligation is to make all of us holy. In today's gospel, Jesus does his Jesus thing, where they are trying to entrap him, and he completely dumbfounds them by answering a question that they aren't even asking. They're asking a tax question, and he's talking about your priority. Then repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God. Make God first in your life, in your family, in your profession, in your country, in your ministry, in your education. God is the priority. Incorporate God into every aspect of our lives, and our lives will forever change for the better. Just as Father Don kept telling us when he was talking about our next steps in that series, how do we incorporate God into each aspect of our life? By putting God first, by taking those next steps, by committing to be part of this 30-year enterprise that we call St. Peter Parish. Why wouldn't you? You have everything to gain and nothing to lose. If you're able to do that, take a step or two toward God, then God will take care of the rest, the spiritual part that you think that maybe you're lacking. If you want a spiritual experience, start with the practical. If you can't even take one little step, then just lean toward him and pray for some help, and maybe God's gravity will take over. In the next 3 weeks, we're going to make sense out of the challenge that my imaginary parents gave me in their note when I turned 30. St. Peter Parish exists to help each one of us understand that we are all here to grow up, meaning we exist to help each other mature as Christians. Next week, grow up. Then we will challenge each other to get a job. What does God want each one of us to do with our lives? And what does God want all of us as a parish to do? And finally, 4 weeks out, we will ask each other to get a life. We will find fulfillment and purpose in our lives by living for others. That's getting the life you always wanted, a life free from the burdens of all those obligations and most of those stresses that we put on ourselves. So what is our priority as Christians? What is our one true thing? Well, we just said God. You can say God, and that's the implication in the first reading and in the gospel. But what we do is much simpler than that. We love. Love is our priority in action. Love God, love others, make disciples because you love others. Love is what we should put into every aspect of our lives. Love is the one thing that we can base all of our decisions on. Where God is a noun, love is a verb for all you English majors. Where God is a noun, love is a verb. We are people of God, and what we do is love. Love is the one thing that we can judge whether an action is correct or not. Love is what keeps us from working against Jesus like the Pharisees who were trying to entrap him. What is it that helps you be a better man or woman? What is it that leads you to heaven? Love. Even those who never hear the word Jesus in their lives know him through love. The steps that Father Don spoke about last month, have you started? Have you picked your next step? Serve, tithe, engage, pray, share. Remember? Get your priority straight. We'll see you next week. Bring a friend.